evening. And I have to say, Olivia is a little distracted. She told me a moment ago there's 20 chickens hatching at her house right now. So
Wow, are they hers?
I think she's been wonderful to a friend or a neighbor. So
Wow.
yeah. So
There they are.
what's that? Hi. Are you going to show us chickens?
Let's hear the sound.
Oh God.
Gosh,
All right.
Sweet.
only in the islands.
Okay, we're going to go through roll call. I'm just going to call people off. So I have Patty Garcia. I have Paul Dossett. I have Janet Barnell. I have Anne-Marie Shanks, Maureen C., Bill Apple, Dave Anderson, Sharon Abreu, Tom Starr, David Dillendorf, Tony Gazelle, Liz Lafferty, Richard Grout, and Robert O'Connell, and Olivia Roseberry. And guests so far, we have Prosecutor Gaylord, Minor Life, and Councilmember Minnie. Thank you all for being here this evening. And I will try, others remind me if others join in late to recognize them, but I know that we do have a few absences tonight. I'm not even going to say it about the length of this meeting, but I'm hopeful. So I'll just stop there and I'm going to knock on my desk. So do we have minutes, Olivia? Were those minutes sent out?
Yeah.
Did
They were.
people receive the last minutes?
Yep. Those were sent
okay.
out to everyone.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Dave, did you have a question or comment on the minutes?
Yes, I do. I made a remark about making sure that voters are represented. The issues that face voters directly are reflected in what our work is doing, in specifically bringing the issue of term limits, initiatives, election of officers of the climate and environment, making sure those are first and foremost on the ballot because they affect voters. So make sure those are on the 2021. Like that.
And that wasn't reflected in the minutes?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Where would that?
Thanks to Sharon for all your good note
Yeah.
taking. Though. Really.
I believe it was right before Tony speaking on, it was at 35 minutes. I think it was right before Tony spoke.
Would you be willing to send Sharon a brief sentence on that? And then are folks okay with that, what he just stated, just being added to the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the minutes? With that,
I move the minutes be approved as amended.
thank you, Paul. Is there a second? Okay, Patty. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes are adopted.
Karen, I'm abstaining. I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know if they are correct or not.
Okay, great. So one abstention. Janet Barnell. Okay, wonderful. All right. I was just going back to look at another note, excuse me. So the bulk of this meeting, what I think would be helpful is if we quickly go around to committee leads. And it doesn't have to be quick, but don't just speak because you can. But go through what you've already submitted to Megan, if that's been sent to me, so that we can get it on to Randy and allow him ample time to dive in. And so why don't we start maybe with Paul? I know, Paul, you already sent me an email saying where you were, but if you could just share with the full CRC. And what we want to know is just kind of like, what is left to be done? What have you already done? And where is that product? Is it with Megan? Is it back from Megan? Am I negligent in getting it to Randy? Kind of where are we with that? So Paul, is that okay if we start with you?
Well, yes, the advocate was approved by the CRC, and that's what was moved forward. Other than that, you wanted bullets for that particular motion, and what was submitted. So I'm not sure what else you need.
Was the language sent to Megan, and has she gone through that and prepared in an underlined strikeout form? Or did you guys do that already?
It's a recommendation.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a-
sorry.
it was a recommendation.
That's right, that's right, that's right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So who has an amendment that they are working on or have worked on? Let's start that way. Let's go to Patty and then Maureen and then Bob.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Poor Megan. I sent her a bunch of language. I did not send bullet points. I have 3 different initiatives that are being combined into one. So it was a little hard to make it brief. And yeah, I was hoping that Megan would hone it for me, and she's working on it.
Okay, and Patty, what are those amendments?
Oh, okay, don't have it in front of me, but one of them was about reducing the amount of signatures from 15% to
Oh, these are the
8%.
initiatives.
This is for initiative and a referendum. And the second one was to remove the financial requirement. And the third one was to regulate signature gatherers, which, yeah. So anyway, I sent a bunch of stuff to her and asked her to hone it for me.
Okay, so this is exactly what I need, Patty. Thank you, because then I want to have, I'm compiling right now in my notes, and then I'll type it up, kind of a tracking list of where things are, so that when I speak to Megan later, I can say, you know, okay, I understand this one's on your plate, this one's done, and so on. So those are with Megan. Okay. And then who was next? Maureen?
Term limits. I sent the fact sheet to Megan and to you, Kevin.
Mhm.
I included the issue, the recommendations, and the issues, the recommendation, the language for the amendment. I have a list of bullet points I'm still putting together, and I'm going to send to the full committee. I'm hoping, I know that there's thinking that it could wait till next year, but I am hoping term limits will make the cheerleading cut for this year, because I think it's a really perfect thing for the voters to have a chance to read and do something about. So anyway, I've done that.
So that's with Megan.
And you.
Yes, yes. Okay, Bob.
Bob, you're muted.
Get that T-shirt.
It's the best idea for me to remain muted as long as possible. But anyway, I have I have 3 items that the process committee is finished with. I filled out the fact sheets in the way that they were that we were asked to do, with title, issue, amendment, and recommendation. And I also included, as we were asked to do, the findings for each one. Those include the preamble, has all the language in it, of course. That includes the CRC budget and provisions with all the language. And it includes, finally, the declaration of community values with all the language. So I'm done.
Oh, I'm done.
Well, I mean, if I had a microphone, I'd drop it, but you know,
Actually,
actually I do have a microphone. Look.
No problem.
So Bob, just to clarify, sorry, I was writing notes and for some reason, maybe I can't walk and chew gum or listen and write at the same time. So where are those 3 right now? The preamble, value statement, and CRC budget. Those are with Megan, or you?
I sent them to Megan last weekend,
Okay,
all of that material.
okay. Okay, who's next? Who else has an amendment? Anne-Marie?
We sent this afternoon, the changed amendments, our draft amendments for the C&E commissioner. And I just got some additional language for our fact sheet template. So that'll go this evening.
Awesome.
So they're going to Megan. I'm not including you on this.
That's fine. That's wonderful, actually. Um, Okay, others with amendments. Is that all of our amendments?
Oh, where's Jane?
We
Jane,
don't have justice.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so Jane can't be here this evening.
Okay.
we don't have Kyle either. We don't have Jane or Kyle.
No, we do not.
Ooh.
Megan, are you there?
He's muted.
I know she was going to be in and out, so. Megan? Have you received the write-up from Jane or Kyle from the Justice and Equity Committee yet? Is that on your lap yet, or is it still with them?
She's not there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm in the car. My daughter forgot her cell phone somewhere. So I've been listening. So they are working on the fact sheet information. I have final documentation from them on the amendments, I believe, but I have to go back and double check. Can you guys explain one thing for me? The public advocate, is that just going to be a recommendation? That's not an amendment?
Correct, recommendation.
Okay.
I think it would be helpful as we're talking about this.
Oops.
We lost you, Megan. Can you hear us, Megan? Okay, if you get to a spot where you have better reception, let us know, because I was going to actually ask you what I think you were just about to say, which is what can be most helpful for you to finish this process. So she'll come back on when she can. And I think that's it then. I think that actually is all of our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, it's not. Who has the list in front of them? I have too many notes open and not the full list.
3, 5, 6.
Initiatives and referendums is 1.
So Salish acknowledgement.
The acknowledgement, yep.
Commission budget and provisions review. And
Budget was sent by Bob O'Connell. So the tribal acknowledgement,
and ranked choice voting.
that's it. Thank you very much, Tony. Who was working on ranked choice?
This is the
Funny.
under the elections subcommittee, and since it did not move out of committee, it was actually brought forward to the CRC. I didn't know who was going to be putting that forward. Sharon has her hand up.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. And I remember that the same way. I'm just not sure also who was drafting that language to get to Megan and so on. So Sharon, do you have a comment?
I thought Tony was doing that, but if not, if you want me to do that, I'll do that.
Somebody should step in rather quickly on that.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
It wasn't clear to me because like I said, as the elections subcommittee, we didn't really move it forward. So it really came out of our hands to do this. So if somebody else wants to do it, that'd be great. One thing, Mr. Chair, about the elections, we also recommended some verbiage and we sent it to Megan and to Catherine. I did not send it to you regarding the elections observation. So
I'm not sure that I have that.
yeah, it was sent to the elections office and they contacted me not knowing what's that about, and I replied. That's the verbiage to observe the elections process from when the ballots are picked up to the time they get to the county and counted and so on.
And that
was a recommendation, not a amendment.
Okay. Megan, what can be most helpful? So it sounds like the only one, let me at least get a nod from you that you have these. So what I understand is that the ones around initiative and referendum, so reducing signatures, removing financial obligations, and regulating signature gatherers, that you have that.
Mhm,
You have term limits. You have
mhm,
preamble, the
Mhm.
value statement, and the CRC
Mhm.
budget piece, which is the
Yes.
one about how the budget works for the CRC and such in the future. You have,
Mhm.
as of this morning, the Climate Environment Commissioner. You
But I don't have like a condensed version of that. And that's one where I would really like you guys to at least provide a little language on that for the fact sheet. I have like the big thing.
right.
I don't have, I would really like you guys to at least get started with that. So it's coming, it's part of it. It's coming from you,
Right.
Exactly.
So I sent you
Yeah.
the actual amendment language, and we should have the fact sheet for you this evening.
Okay. Okay.
Great. And then on the amendment language, what's important is that we can turn those over to Randy in an expedited manner too, so that he can do a final review and come back with suggestions as well. And I know, Megan, the way you're working on them is to get them into nearly finished language, is my understanding. And so hopefully that all happens soon, but it sounds like, let me just finish through the list. So the fact sheet data or the bullet points are coming to Megan today or early tomorrow from Anne Marie. Justice and equity. Do you have those from
I
Jane?
know, and I need all three of those. And I have the full amendments for those, but I don't have the fact sheet information, I believe. I'd have to go back and
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I have the full text for all of those. What I don't have is the boiled down version.
Okay.
So I'm sorry for the cutting out there. I was in the car. I
Don't
think
worry.
it would be helpful if we just are super clear in our language about, we've got amendments that come with findings. And some of you have sent me your findings. And then we have the recommendations. Some people are calling the findings the recommendations, and it's super confusing. So let's really try to keep those two things separately labeled. Okay.
Absolutely. And then Megan, you have the tribal acknowledgement?
I do,
Okay. So
but I
the only
don't
one
have a fact sheet summary for that yet, which I would love for those guys to do.
Okay. Okay. And then, so the only one you're missing at this point is ranked choice voting. And it sounds like there was a ball dropped there. And so we'll get on that right now. Bob?
Mm,
Hear me, Bob.
I have a question about this format then. I misunderstood something about what was wanted under recommendation. I thought, for instance, we have a recommendation that we passed that would be submitted to the council regarding community values. But under recommendations and what I turned into Megan, I wrote, the Declaration of Community Values was recommended by the CRC Process Committee on May 26, 2021, and was approved by the Charter Review Committee on May 27th, 2021, as a proposed amendment to the Santa Monica County Home Rule Charter. I thought that's what she wanted. The recommendation, which is a longer thing, that's will be eventually addressed to the council. I didn't put that in there. Is that
Okay.
what was required under?
No, I think you guys need to be clear in your language. So you have an amendment comes with supporting information, which is the findings. Okay, and I have what I need from you, Bob. Don't worry about it. Okay, we're
I
good.
sent you findings.
I've got what I need from you. It's just a question of what we're
Okay,
calling
so
it.
you don't need the
But you guys,
recommendation that
like everybody needs to,
Okay.
put together a list to me, because I don't actually have a clear idea of what the list is on the recommendations. And those were the issues that you decided you didn't want to present in amendment form, but you still wanted to bring to the council. And so the best example of that is the tourism issue from governance. Okay.
Mhm.
I still have one of those to send to you then,
Okay.
because I
Okay.
didn't understand. That's what
And
you
so
wanted.
I was just going to go back now and now circle through. So we have the amendments and we understand that they're all they're all with Megan except for ranked choice at this point. And a couple pieces, the fact sheets, for instance, from Justice and Equity and Climate Commissioner still need to be sent, the bullet points. Let's go into, and if it would help, if somebody has, and Olivia, I'm sorry, I know you're with the chickens, but do you or does somebody have the slideshow? I can't pull it up from our town halls, because that has a nice summary in the opening slides of the amendments versus recommendations.
Olivia can.
Yeah, it's posted on the CRC website.
Yeah, but I'm just
The
saying,
link
if
to it.
somebody can pull it up, look at this. Olivia, Tony, you're a rock star.
Tony is unbelievable.
Okay, so let's go through. We went through all these. Everybody look, we're not missing anything. So let's go now to recommendations.
Mm.
That was it. Go back up. That's it. Okay. Let's just go through these. So Megan,
Yeah.
Don't we need to back up to amendments, because public advocate is on there, which I thought was an amendment, but I was told 20 minutes ago that it was just going to be a recommendation. So which is it? Office of Public Advocate, number 7.
I believe that is still considered an amendment.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Oh, for 22.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're not talking years right now. That's
Not years.
discussion. So let's just go through the amendments first. So, okay, so we missed one, which is public advocate. So Megan, do you have the public advocate language?
No, and I don't even know who that is.
okay.
Who's in charge of that?
Oh, that's it.
Paul is, but Paul and I will do that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, I think I have a complete list of the amendment issues.
Okay.
So let's talk about the recommendations.
Yep. So if we can go to that list, here we are. Okay. So Megan, do you have tourism?
I more or less, I have the large summary of it and we're working on the fact sheet summary of it.
So I'm going to say you've got what you need, or
I think so.
Okay. Elections observations.
I don't think I have this. And so if I do, it came to me a while ago. So I would like this to be resent.
Yeah, I'll resend it to you. It did go to the elections office already, but I'll send it to you as well. I think you forwarded to Camelin, and I got an email from Camelin that it was going to be forwarded to Mylene. So anyway, I'll resend it.
Oh yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Neither do I. So that's so that you've already sent it, just saying here's a recommendation.
Yeah, I sent the recommendation, and the subject matter was recommendations to go to the auditor and the elections department. And the text of the recommendation is in the email. I will resend it again to Megan, Kevin, Catherine, Olivia. and
Just
you.
at this point, you can just send it to Megan.
Okay.
Megan and I are going to be communication. So
It'll be done. It'll be coming shortly.
great. Thank you. Okay. Law and Justice Council. Do you have that, Megan?
Nope. I don't really have any of these except for the tourism one.
Okay.
Is law and justice language supposed to come from Jane and Kyle?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have a question.
Bob?
I have not yet sent the implementation of community values to Megan because I didn't know it was required, but I will do that right after this meeting. However, one observation I have is that the implementation of community values declaration throughout government will not make any sense unless that passes at the election time. Unless the community values declaration passes, you don't send people something about the implementation of it. So I don't know exactly what we do about that unless we just send it to them and say, here is a recommendation for you if this passes.
I think at this point, that's the way that would happen because our recommendations would likely go before the ballot.
Right.
Would be.
Okay,
So
all right.
let's go to Maureen and then I will try to explain and others and Megan can try to explain the question in the chat from Maureen too. But Maureen?
My question under recommendations is number 7. Exempt individuals abide by the same personnel procedures as county employees. And this is kind of a dual thing because the operations committee worked on this to help explain the exemption of electeds from the personnel rules. And then we gave that up because Justice and Equity was doing something a little more elaborate and it was inclusive in their thing. So I don't know what that means.
On the Justice and Equity Committee, we have discussed some clarification there, and I'm not sure where that language is at this point. So
I don't
without
think that's
change-
I don't think that's the correct language.
Yeah. So, well, that's what it was during our town halls. I'm saying I think it's changed in our last meeting a little bit. So
Then I missed it. Okay.
it's okay though. So what we can do is go back we'll go back to, I'm going to go back to Jane and Kyle on a lot of these anyway. And so we'll have that conversation and get that clarified.
Okay.
Megan, do you
Yeah.
want to take a crack at answering Anne Marie's question in the chat about what are the fact sheets for? And then I can take a crack too.
I think you should just take a crack.
Yeah, I want to know who the audience is.
Yeah.
Your
so-
voters.
Yeah, the audience is the general public. And so one of the things we've heard, and I had a conversation with some of you in another committee meeting today about this. One of the things we've heard from the public is even those who are really supportive of the ideas that we're working on are saying, there's a lot of minutia here. What does it really mean? Kind of what does it get to? And so the idea of these fact sheets is the bumper sticker format of what it is we're doing so that we can explain it in layman's terms to folks. And, we've spent a lot of time with this commission going into deep detail like we needed to on a number of these subjects. Now is the time that we pull back from that. We let Megan help us streamline that information. And then we turn around and we present it to the public in an understandable format. And part of the difficulty, I will say also, has been that it's been a moving target. We've gone back and forth on 10 different ideas on each one of these amendments that we're considering just about. And so it's hard to boil that down into talking points when the detail changes. However, now, as we're finalizing these, is the time that we need to be able to have kind of the one pagers or one paragraph that says, this is what this is the issue it's addressing, this is why this solution addresses it. And that's the kind of fact sheet principle. And the target audience, as Megan just said, it's the general public. This is what's going to be on the county website for each of the different amendments and so on when we conclude our work. Or if we continue to move forward in 2 phases, then the first phase would go up and be available. But these are the talking points. Anne Marie? No? Megan, did you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay, we can stop sharing, Tony. Thank you so much for that. So what I have is that all but one of the amendments are mostly with Megan. Some of them still need the fact sheet data, the bullet points. A majority of the recommendations still need to go to Megan, and that's okay. Let's just get them to her as quickly as we can. And then we can begin finalizing that, getting them to Randy as soon as we can, Randy, the prosecutor, and his team. And one of the things that, and I shared this in our last meeting, I believe, in our weekly call with the prosecutor, one of the things that was great is that Amy and Randy put forward that they would rather have more information now so they can get it sooner and start reviewing this stuff and spending time on it. And if we end up saying, oh, we're not going to do that one after all. They recognize that that's, that may happen, but they would rather have the information sooner than later. So we should not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We shouldn't try and totally perfect everything. We should be getting them to the prosecutor in as timely of a manner as we can so that they can get busy on the work that they have to do. And however, I will say that what I have seen kind of going back and forth with Megan is that what we're getting from Megan is very close to a finished product, which is fantastic. So Megan, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so can we send him, do you think Randy is okay if we start sending them to him individually? Like we don't have to put the whole document together?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can get
All right.
that moving soon,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, no. And Randy, feel free to chime in if I'm getting this wrong, but in our conversation just last week, Randy was very clear that his office would appreciate stuff coming in as soon as possible and that we do not have to wait for the full document. Definitely start sending it to him as we have it. So Megan, when those are done, the way it'll work is you'll send it back to the subcommittee or the, maybe with a CC to the full CRC, but I would just say back to the subcommittee and say, did we get it right? And then I will send that on to Randy so that, and the reason it should go through myself and Olivia is because then we have a list of, we need to make sure we're keeping track of everything. I don't want to get to the end and be like, oh my God, we missed one.
Well, and I think one of the issues that everyone needs to be super careful about, and Bob, I just wrote you about this, for example, with the community values, we missed an edit. And so people keep sending me a text that I know is missing a word. So you guys need to be really, really careful with managing your final documents. And I mean, Kevin, I think you and Olivia ultimately need to keep a file of what the final version is that you've sent to the PA's office. And then, when we receive something back from them, we just need to be really clean about the documents.
Yeah, exactly. And Randy just posted in the chat too that I got it right. So that's nice. I need to mute myself for 1 second. Sorry.
Megan, I didn't quite understand what your concern was, that last thing you voiced, like you're not feeling like you're getting the final, or we find a more current version of the final. I didn't understand.
I'm worried about multiple drafts of these documents floating around. And for example, I have had 2 versions of the community values come back to me from committee members. And I distinctly remember us discussing adding a word and it's not in the version that I'm being sent. And I think that was important to people. And so I'm trying to make sure that we capture that. But if you guys aren't doing a good job of keeping track of your documents and we're just kind of sending documents all over the place, then like at a certain point, I lose control of it,
Right. Of course,
Does that
Megan,
make sense?
if you're going back and forth with other committee members other than the chairperson, and then when the chairperson sends you the document that I have, I'm not going to be up on what you guys may have worked out separately. It's kind of not exactly the right way to do it. But
so I tried to clarify that in an email, I don't know when, recently in the last week. So let's just go through this the way it'll work again. One is subcommittee chairs send documents to Megan. We can't have everybody on the commission calling and emailing Megan with random is way too strong. It may be very important, but just go through the subcommittee chair so that we know where those points of contact are. I do not need to be, and Olivia does not need to be copied on that. What we need to get though is then when Megan sends it back to you saying, did we get it right? I'm copied on that. And then when you guys reply and you say, yeah, we got it right, or yeah, you got it right, then I say, awesome, Randy. But let me handle that. And I'm keeping it a list so that we have it. And what I'm going to do based on what we just went through today is I'm going to keep following up with the people who are the lead on the subject and say, hey, I just heard from Megan that, this one isn't complete or she needs something. You've heard from her. You need to get back to her. We need this done so that we can keep that master list going. And then Randy will, as he reviews stuff, send his edits or issues that come up back to the full CRC. So everybody will see that, but that will go back into the list that I'm compiling as well. And then the other thing that Megan will then be working on, and so I've got Tony and then Liz. The other thing that Megan will then be working on is compiling the entire final document, but we're not there yet. We've got to do this process that we just explained first. So Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just put it in the chat. I'm asking Megan. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Megan. Got it. I'm done.
I love that. I wish more questions went that way. Liz?
I just want to clarify two different versions I think I've heard is one that when we submit things to Megan, the intent is that they are as close to final as we can get them. She's going to do what she does with them, but we still have an opportunity, not looking for that, but we still have an opportunity to say, you know what, this word doesn't, this, we need to, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted that to be clear to all the committees and stuff that.
Until we submit to the council. So actually, Randy will review these too, and he may come back with suggestions as well. Some of them may be, legal suggestions where he says, hey, this really needs to be, drafted a different way. Some of them may be a suggestion where he says, this might work better in this way. So there will be opportunities for changes then as well. But documents, we can make edit. And again, like you said, we're not looking for this. We're not suggesting this, but until we submit them to the county council, until we file them with the county council, we can make changes that are necessary. We obviously
thank you.
Those, but yeah, Dick.
I just want to urge all of us, if we're going to do that, if we're going to take another look after it comes back to Megan, that we do that on a really rapid turnaround, like 24 hours, 48 hours tops.
Which, unless there's more questions, that's a perfect segue into our next agenda item. Are there more questions on this process? Randy, you're here. Is there anything you want to add at that point, just on that process from your standpoint, from when it gets to you? Any thoughts? Maybe he's not here. Okay. So.
He did. Yeah.
Oh, sounds good. Okay. All right. So on the timing, I sent out an email late last night. I had a long night getting caught up on CRC emails, discussing some of the timeline going forward. We also received an email from Jamie Stevens representing the council regarding their timeline. There was some discussion of kind of 3-touch and such with the council. That is obviously not necessary because it's a resolution that we will do that is prepared. The way it was prepared in the past was that the prosecutor actually helped us prepare, helped the previous Charter Review Commission prepare the resolution that we will submit, that we will file with the council. But the council has in their letter stated that they have 3 meetings between now and August 3rd that work for them in a timely manner, with Councilmember Minnie not being available in the last meeting of July. My hope is that entire discussion is a moot point because we are completed with whether it's phase 1 or our final recommendations before that. My hope is that everything we just discussed as far as that process could take place over the next week and a half or so, 2 weeks. And when I look at it, it's exciting because we're close. We're really close. We've done monumental amount of work and we're almost there. And so the hope is that this process of sending things to Megan, we get them back from Megan, they go to the prosecutor, they come back to us. When they come back to us, we're at the point then where we could start sending them, filing them with the county. Then we have to compile the final, which is the entire document, and then that gets filed. There is a remaining question of, and right now we are still under the assumption that we are going for 2 ballot measures. That was voted on the 27th, I believe. And so that is the formal position of the CRC. That has not been changed. There has obviously been a lot of question about that. because I think it was the day after that vote, or somewhere right around there, we got this memo from Randy, from our prosecutor. And so that discussion has come up quite a bit. And as far as the timeline, that obviously matters a lot. And so we have spent a lot of time going back and forth on trying to think about how that's going to work. Your executive committee spent a considerable amount of time a week ago doing two things: making a lot of the amendments recommendations, and then considering which ones would be year one and year two. That was also adopted by the full CRC, those recommendations. And so that is the action that we're moving under now, with the year one, year two, and that those 11 be amendments and the remainder be recommendations. Patty, I see your hand. I'll get there in 1 sec. The other issue, though, is, do we want to take another crack at this? Do we want to think about how we move forward as far as 1 year versus 2 years? And if so, do we want to try to reduce further the number of amendments we're putting forward? And that's the discussion I'd like to open. And I'd love to just have us be able to just have a conversation, not throw motions on the table, but just have a conversation about it amongst ourselves and see what the flavor is, what people are thinking. And then if, depending on how it goes, I might have a recommendation for a potential action that maybe could help us. So Patty.
Yeah, my first question was, because I was voted yes on the other thing, if I could take that back. I think there's a Robert's rules or whatever. And because I'd like to see actually everything go on the ballot forward, this first one. And so I'm kind of in favor of that. I even think that the electorate could handle 11 issues. We often have a lot of issues on the ballot, and we have the luxury of getting mail ballots and have a long time to look at them before we actually have to turn them in, and we can be really well aware of what's going on the ballot. And I really don't want to lose the momentum that we have, because now there's a lot of talk around the community, and there will be more and more as this gets forward. I don't want to see some of the issues have to wait a whole year when the momentum's gone, unless possibly the one about the CRC budget, which who could care less except us. You know, I just want to come forward to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't even care about that. That's for the next.
Yeah, that's the next one.
There's a few like that could be delayed without much ramification. But Patty, your point is very well made. Bob?
I spent some time in between the 10 o'clock meeting and this meeting with the 11 present proposals and what years they had been proposed for and all of that business. And I put them into groups that seem to be related and maybe could be one budget proposal. And I came down with using all 11, I came down with 5 groups. And then if you take budget out and put it aside, then there are only 4 groups. So you could put 4 on one year and 4 on, 2 on 1 year and 2 on the next, or 4 on 1 year under that plan. I will tell you that I had a little social event yesterday, and there were a group of people there. They knew that I was on the commission. They said, how's the commission doing? Oh, it's doing fine. Let me ask you a question. How many ballot measures do you think you could concentrate on and successfully vote on? I went around the room. Everyone said 1. I was shocked that they said that. I said, what? What are you talking about? Because I was under the impression that there'd been more than that, but maybe it's just the idiots I hang out with, but that could be. But at any rate, I sent that to all the members of the commission, if you wanted to take a look at that and consider that at some point.
Thank you. very much. And I was actually going to, while we've got Randy here, if I could put him on the spot in a little bit, I was going to ask if somebody could share that list, because I
It's in the chat.
actually, I see that, but maybe up on the screen, but not yet. But the point is that, and actually maybe that's not as constructive right now as I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the point is that I'm not sure some of those can actually be combined. I think they have to be separate individual ballot measures. The other thing I will say is I've spent a lot of time with people who all they do is pay attention to voting, including in San Juan County. And you get more than 4 or 5 things on a ballot that are somewhat related. So in this case, they'd all be, propositions. You get voter fatigue. And you've heard the expression vote down the ballot. The reason people always say that is because a bunch of people don't vote down the ballot. And so you will lose interest. Now, San Juan County has one of the more educated and one of the more engaged voting constituencies in the country consistently. And so we're above the norm, but I still worry. I definitely would not support 11 on one ballot. I can tell you that right now. Now, maybe I get outvoted on that. So let's go, Maureen.
I mean, I think that it would be good if our committee, the executive committee, took another shot at reducing this and just talking about it again and seeing if there's a way we can change this. I honestly, I don't know why I think this, but I thought public advocate was a recommendation. So I think there are things there's some wiggle room in here. And I think we can talk about that. And I don't know whether, Kevin, you want that to happen, but.
So that was actually
a good idea.
My suggestion was, but I wanted to allow more conversation. But what I was thinking coming into this meeting and looking at everybody's different emails to me and the different discussions going back and forth that I've had and many of you have had, is that I think it would be wise to have the executive committee try. So last time the executive committee did a good job of saying these ones can be recommendations, these ones could be second year. If the full commission wanted to task the executive committee to take a second crack at this to try and say, let's see if we could actually reduce the number of amendments. And I will say that could include making more recommendations. It could also include maybe dropping 1 or 2. And so I think all of that needs to be on the option and on the table. I'm not saying that needs to happen, but I think the executive committee needs to have the ability to go into this open-minded and really try and hone down on it. So if folks want to comment on that, if folks have thoughts on that, and then also if folks have other ideas. Anything?
Well,
Megan, why don't you?
I'd actually rather that the commissioners speak first. I can go last.
Okay, Bob.
Good idea.
And then Tom. Good idea having the executive committee jump on it.
Yes, to have the executive committee work on this, including the possibility of taking a look at what I came up with as far as bunching them together. I realize it's possible that some of them might not be able to be that way, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tom?
It seems to me that there's a subject of which can be combined into some logical subject, because the law clearly states that each proposition has to be limited to a certain subject. I would appreciate to hear from Bob or Bill Apple on their opinion on how combinable are these 11, and will they withstand a test, as we recently heard in the gubernatorial election. End of question.
Thank you, Tom. Bob, do you want?
Yeah, I do have an example, Tom, of that, and that would be something you could call the charter introduction. In the charter introduction, you could include the acknowledgement, the preamble, and the values. Those are 3 things that are new, are going to be added, and are going to be the very first 3 things in the charter before you get into the substance of it. So it's kind of introducing the world to the charter and who we are, where we're coming from. So I think in that sense, those are all 3 amendments, and then that could turn into 1 amendment. You could do that. I don't see why you couldn't.
The other is there's 3 that are all around referendum and initiative.
Right.
we've already talked about.
They've
So-
already been combined, I believe,
Yeah.
into,
and
into
so
one
that's-
amendment.
Bill, and then Liz, and then David.
You're not limited to amending just one section. The issue is subject matter.
Yeah.
What Bob said is absolutely right. Those three things could be packaged, if done well, as a single proposition. I think Randy's the boss here, but I think it would be worth looking at the others to see where the common denominators are. And Randy is the one to advise where he feels that log rolling, the mixing of different issues is occurring. I think Randy's advice on how to package this would be invaluable.
Yes, I would also say that having, and Randy, you're here, so if you take yourself off of on video, if you care to chime in, but having worked with Randy for now 20 years or something, I will tell you that I think that what would be best is that we are able to put together language that then he can look at and say, yes, this works, or it doesn't. I think us speaking kind of high level, like, oh, maybe we combine these. I think, us taking the time to try and combine them with Megan is going to be a first step. Randy, did you want to comment before we go to the others?
Well, I see the items in underlined strikeout format. It's hard for me to answer the question.
Yep.
And so I reserve doing that. That said, just looking at the list that was put in the chat, there is some utility, I think, that if there's a new introduction created, that all of the items in that introduction could be assembled together in one, as Commissioner O'Connor and Commissioner Apple have suggested may be an approach too, but I'll reserve on everything else. And really, this is not going to take a long period of time. I just want to see the exact language, how many sections are amended, what we're talking about. I haven't seen all that, so I just reserve.
Yep, of course. Liz, David, Megan.
So I do think that the risk in combining is like, so for the initiative and referendum, there were 3 different items there, and people may not at all be interested in removing the need for financial on there, but they might be totally in favor of reducing the number of votes. And if we combine them, then if I understand correctly, then it becomes kind of all or nothing around that.
Mm-hmm.
So then we would have to look at, do we amend before we go to a final? I'm thinking out loud on how this would play out.
Yeah. No, that is a risk. That is a risk. David.
I was going to say the same thing. You risk throwing out the baby. If you have 3 things in there and somebody has a real problem with one of them, let's really passionate about one of them, but they like the other 2, then they might vote no. And so you run that risk. I agree with Liz. It's something to be considered, and a risk of doing it this way.
I think everything we're doing, we need to be eyes wide open. So thank you both very much. That said, we put 11 on the ballot. I guarantee you the risk is that many of them fail because of voter fatigue. It just happens. The other thing is people, when there's too many, it just gets confusing. It's kind of like, I'm over it. And so maybe even some of the ones that are really powerful and really important to people fail because of that. So I've got Bob, and I've got Megan, and then Bob, and then Dick. Megan, I'm just going to put you on the list in case you want to chime in.
I would just love to see you guys do the same thing with the recommendations too, because when I think when I kind of look at it with fresh eyes, I see, there's a group of transparency issues. There's a group of budget issues, and like they overlap sometimes, but if you could group those together and simplify it, I think you can present them together and get down to maybe 7.
Yeah, the issue there is the amendments are going to the voters, so that needs to be our priority. But you are correct. If we can simplify it for the county council as well, that's great. They will obviously have the luxury of taking more time to look at these things over a long period of time versus one ballot. I've got Bob and then Dick.
I think that I can agree with the observation made by David and by Liz that there is that risk. However, there is an obverse side to that. You can, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if people like the baby, you can end up with the bathwater too. So, in other words, you can bring along something that might not get voted for by getting somebody's vote for something that's important to them. That's the obverse side. It's as legitimate as the reverse side. So it's a risk. It's kind of throwing the dice and saying, I hope I gain more than I lose.
I think there's two things we need to consider. One is, once we try and group some of these, come up with the language and give that to Randy, he will give us the legal opinion of whether or not those can actually be grouped. Then there's also a political question of, do we want to group those? And we need to keep in mind those are two separate questions. One is, are we going to lose something or gain something by grouping these? The other is, can we actually group them? And Randy's going to be really clear when he sees the language of, yes, that can happen, or no, it can't. And those are two separate pieces. One we're deciding, and one the law will dictate. Dick?
Did we not already decide by vote that the three initiative proposals were going to be combined?
Yes.
And a majority of us agreed to that?
Yes, we did.
Yep.
Okay, so the only way that gets reconsidered is if people who were in the majority on the vote make a motion in a second, and it gets a majority vote to reconsider. So let's be clear about that. The other thing I would say is that I think we should not hold out this false hope that we can, and I think it's a false hope, that we can combine enough of these to get down to 5 or 6. I think the reality is, and we need to be thinking about it, that some of them are either going to have to go on a 2022 ballot, or they're going to go away. I just think that's reality. Now, it's up to Randy, I get it. But when I look at these, I just think, and my understanding of how that works, I just think, I don't see it, 5 or 6.
I think I think that the suggestion that Bob just made of combining the introduction ones, and again, Randy commented on that. Randy has not seen the language and weighed in formally on that, but that would get us to 9 from 11. That doesn't get us to 5 or 6. So I think, Dick, you're making a really important point, which everybody needs to keep in mind, which is, if we are trying to aim for one ballot, 1 year, we're likely going to have to drop some or move them to recommendations if possible.
May I respond quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. I think those 3 are probably a real possibility. I also think that the 2 that Bob put together under justice and equity are a possibility. But when I look at the others, I don't see anything.
So that's why, so the executive committee can then take the time over the next days to dive into this deeper. And Olivia, I'm so sorry, I didn't see your hand. Olivia, please.
So I hear the discussion, I understand the necessity, but it seems a little premature to even be discussing this when we haven't decided as a full commission if we're going to move forward with presenting 2 ballot measures or 1. And it seems like we should decide that first, because we've already decided as a full commission that, yes, we're going to do that. And if we're going to ask the executive committee to do a lot of extra work, it seems like we should get more clear on this part first.
Well, I think that there's a benefit to trying to whittle this down a little bit further anyway. But Olivia, I think you make a really good point, which is, right now we are operating under a motion that was passed by a significant majority of the commission that we're going with 2 ballot measures. And so if we want to continue in that path, then, we could technically go with 11 and you could have, 6 and 5. But we can have a bit of that discussion too. Maybe Olivia, you're making the right point, which is we need to clarify that before we go off with the executive committee to spend more time trying to do this. But Dick?
As a member of the executive committee, I disagree with Olivia on that one. I mean, I'm happy to have to do another meeting to look at that. And I think what we wind up with, I mean, we take a hard look at it, and what we wind up with is a group that under our current vote would go to a second-year ballot. But that's also with the knowledge that if that is not where we wind up, we've got that group that aren't going to go anywhere. But I think it would be worthwhile at this point to do it, and I'm happy to engage in another meeting.
My reason for thinking about the executive committee taking it on was along those lines, Dick, which is, I think what we could do is an exercise of seeing what could be condensed, or at least diving in deeper into that. And then really thinking about, could some be dropped, and then come back with that recommendation. And I think that will dictate if we're going 1 or 2 years, because a lot of people will say, wait, my favorite idea is going to be dropped, or it's going to be second year. I'm not okay with that. And so for me, it's a little cart and horse. Bill?
I'm just suggesting that until we have what we have in final form and get them to Randy, we will not know the legal limits of the extent to which we can package. And I think that without knowing that, I'm not sure that the executive committee's decisions one way or the other should necessarily prevail. We need to know the legal boundaries, and then the executive committee can determine the political boundaries. I think it needs to be in that order, because a surprise in the other direction is awful.
Good point.
Okay. And Olivia just clarified, and she is absolutely correct. We are still, and I'll say it again, we are still operating under the assumption that we're going with 21 and 22, 2 ballots. That was the motion by the commission. That has not been reversed. What I'm trying to do is suggest that, and again, let me try and be clear. I think the executive committee looking at where things could be brought together as a suggestion, and then bringing that back, because Bill, you are correct. Randy will ultimately tell us after he's seen the language if something could be combined or not. But we have to decide if we want to try to combine something. That has to happen before we send Randy a combination language. And so we have to say, like, you know, with the initiative one, yes, we wanted those combined. So we decided that we're combining those. With the introduction, maybe we say, that's a great idea, let's combine those. But the commission needs to decide that, and then we give Randy language, and Randy gets to decide, or not decide, but tell us legally if that's lawful or not. I saw Sharon and then Dick.
Is it worth at this point going over any of the discussion of why we are now in this situation where we have to decide whether to risk trying to put things on a second ballot? Seems like maybe we should be having some of that discussion right now.
Well, again, I mean, we can discuss that, but right now we're under the assumption that we're moving forward with the motion that was carried until that motion is reversed. But we can have a discussion about that, yes. Dick, you want to comment?
Yeah, just in response to what you said, Bill, I think Randy has made it clear to us on more than one occasion that it's not his job to do our work for us. We need to tell him what we want and what we propose. And to that end, I think the executive committee meeting would be valuable.
Okay. Patty. And then Paul, and then David.
After the executive committee meets, and say they meet and they find a way to combine things down to 5 or 4, whatever, I would propose then that we have, you know, I would come up with being the person to say, well, let's only have 1 election and not 2. Because I know you have to do that formally if you were one of the people that voted for it before. If it's, I would propose that budget CRC budget one can certainly be on the next one. If the executive committee is successful in honing these, then I don't think we should push some to 22.
Yeah. Paul and then David.
Well, I want to speak on behalf of what Patty said. I think she has a lot to say that it's correct. That we have a momentum that we're going into this first election, and we're going to lose that momentum entirely by the second year. People are going to be looking at their ballot and say, what's this? And because we don't have that momentum going. And I think that's a very important thing if we were looking at the success of what we're doing here. Having said that, there are some wiggle room, I think, in what we have already for our initiatives going out. So it's important that we do test it to see if there's ways that maybe we want to drop where we have 2 or 3 items in one group. Maybe we can drop a couple in favor of getting the principal reason why we wanted this to go forward to begin with. So I would like to take that back to the executive committee to measure that, to look at it and see if there is any wiggle room. Yeah, we didn't see ourselves being in this position right now, but we are. So we have to look at what is the things that we want to save and what are the things that maybe we can go without, and what are things that maybe we can actually meld into one initiative before the voters, or amendment, excuse me. So I think we're kind of in a loose ends right here, and I just hope that we can maybe do the things we talked about, turning it over to the executive committee to kind of measure what we're talking about here and see if there's a way that we can get into that path. Thank you, Patty, for making those recommendations.
Paul, David.
Yeah, from what I hear, Kevin emphasized that we've already made a decision to go with 2 ballot measures, 2 years, break it down into 2 years, right? And you actually said it's not a subject for discussion unless somebody wants to bring it up and voted in favor of it and wants to say, okay, let's reconsider. And that hasn't happened. So I think we need to move forward on that basis. If somebody wants to bring up the possibility of reconsidering, that's fine. But given that what Kevin said, two ballot measures, I think 4 and 5, whatever the breakdown is, 1 year, 5 the next year, vice versa. I think that's perfectly doable. I think in spite of Bob's friends who only want one of them, I think the voters are smarter than that and can deal with 4 or 5 at a time. 9 at a time, that's a real challenge. And I might add that also by combining them, you complicate things as well. You've got less ballot measures, but now each one of them is much more complicated because it's got 3 things combined. So you've got that to consider if you do combine it. But having said that, are we going to open up the discussion again as to whether or not to do it on 1 or 2? And if we are, I have never heard a final resolution to the difference of opinion between Randy and Kevin on whether or not we can do 2 separate measures. I thought maybe we were going to resolve that before we made a decision on whether or not we're going to go into the 2 different years. So I would like to hear Randy weigh in on that and have that resolved, because I'm still unclear with whether or not that really makes sense. And I think Sharon kind of said the same thing. I see her nodding her head. I think we need to know.
I just want to be clear. There have been differences of opinion between Randy and I on a number of things. This is not one. The email that I sent, I was clarifying with Randy, and I actually under new business was going to ask Randy to clarify some of this as well. But what I was saying in the email is that the reversal of the position was extremely difficult for us, particularly only a week before our first deadline. When we've worked for 5 months under one understanding and then got a different understanding. And Randy sent us an email yesterday saying that he understands there was questions and he would be happy to address the full CRC. So I was going to bring that up under new business. Exactly what you just brought up, David, is let Randy kind of explain the difference between where he was in February versus now, so that we're clearer on that as well.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
I don't new business. That's what we're dealing with right now. That discussion is not, that explanation from Randy is not new business. It's part and parcel of what we're talking about.
I don't disagree. All I was saying is I was planning on having that come up. So if we want to talk about it now, if that's the commission's idea that I wanted to get through this piece first of, do we want to think about trying to reduce further, regardless. I will tell you all that I am now leaning toward trying to do one ballot. However, I think 11 amendments sinks us.
Yeah.
And so that's the back and forth we need to come up with.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to stick with 11, then I think we're 2 ballots. But Randy, are you there? Randy? Great. Are you able to speak to your recent memo, the one regarding our
Sure.
single ballot year versus 2, and then
Sure.
how you came to the reversal of your position?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Look, we've given you advice in writing, and that advice, I think, has accurately described the circumstances under which we gave information early on in the process, in which we were following along what had happened in King County, where 11 measures were proposed by the Charter Review Commission and 8 put on the ballot. We understood 3 were held for a future election. In fact, what we learned is that King County has very different language. And after contacting the attorney representing the Charter Review Commission in King County, we learned that the county council has discretion to not even put forward on the ballot measures that are given to the county council for consideration. And so one of those was of great interest to me. It was a great interest because I did not understand its legality. And the advice was, well, I'm not even sure that's ever going to make it on the ballot. So it's not that they even made it into 2 ballots. I then contacted other prosecutors about other ballots statewide, all the charter counties. And well, some charter counties are thinking of putting them into 2 measures. None has really done it. King County, Whatcom County is the most similar to San Juan County. That's because the freeholders went to Whatcom County and chose Whatcom County language for our ballot and for our charter, excuse me. And that's the language that I've put forward to you. And they have never put forward a measure over the course of 2 elections. It's always been in one batch. So I started to look back at this and I reflected on what had happened in 2012. Went back to the language, went back to this. And this is not just this is a thing I was developing in pieces, not just once, but over multiple days, multiple circumstances. And the reason is because the question is, was it going to be relevant? Okay, were you going to take action that required it to occur in 2 elections or 1? And that didn't occur until the 27th. That's why we immediately pushed out the memo on the 28th. Now there'd been no question, there'd been members who had talked about 2 groups from time to time, but no real decision of the commission. And so that is what prompted, and it wasn't until the commission started speaking about it as a whole that I decided to dust off the material. And so the concern that I have, and the concern that's raised in our memo of the 28th, is a concern not that I would raise, but it's a concern that someone else would challenge the second batch.
Yes.
As being unlawful because the Charter Review Commission would have dissolved by operation of law under the terms of the durational provision of the Charter Review Commission, which has a term of to the end of the year or when the final recommendations are submitted to the county council. So that's what you're faced with. The language is very imperfect. Okay, and I've done my best to try to emphasize that. And what we gave you was not a perfect memorandum of where we think the conclusion is going to be, this is not one of those circumstances. So if anyone's looking for me to give something with absolute clarity, I can't do it. But I can say that there are good arguments to be made on both sides. And the caution to you is, why risk those future amendments when you can solve it today? And that's what you should try to, that's how you should interpret this. And that's why we talked about it in terms of risk adversity and caution. And so Mr. Apple said it better than anybody. You know, when you come to a puddle in a public office, it's better to walk around the puddle than to find out how deep it is. And that's what a judge will say too. You know, that's playful kind of things, but we're not playing with things. We're just trying to move forward, and I'm trying to be as helpful as possible.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay, David, go ahead.
You're muted, David.
I understand Randy's concern and his advice to us that we would run a possible risk if there was something on the second ballot that was very controversial and somebody wanted to really, really go overboard and block it, that they could attempt to do it by challenging the legality of the second. And I understand that, but let me ask a follow-on question to that, Randy. Is it even possible that somebody in challenging the legality of the second amendment package in the second year, they could attempt to argue to throw out the whole baby, including the first year? They just say the whole process was flawed, and therefore, we not only we want the second one. No, is that possible? Is that
Yeah.
Anything's possible in the legal world? I mean, you know how the attorneys work. So,
David, you've probably heard me say before, I never underestimate the ingenuity of opposing counsel. And that's a frequent term I have said for many years. And those of you who have been in council chambers have heard me say it before. You know, that's the world we live in. We're in a very public world. We're looking out for the public interest. I implore you to consider that at the top of your minds as you're going forward and deciding what to do. And Godspeed to you and good luck.
Bob?
Yes, I've got one question for for Randy. I realize this can be thorny. Randy, who decides when this commission has made its final recommendation? Is it the council, the prosecuting attorney, or this commission?
I think this commission submits its final recommendations.
Right.
And you should be prepared to answer any questions about that from the council.
Could we not make it clear, Randy, when let's say we have 3 amendments that we want to propose for this particular ballot. Could we not make it clear when submitting those 3 weeks from now or whenever we submit them, that dear council, here is our first batch of recommendations. We may at some point before December 31st submit a second or even a third batch, but for your purposes, this is our first batch. Please relay them on to the auditor. How would that not work?
Well, are those final?
We're saying these are not our final recommendations. Please be aware that what you have before you are not our final recommendations. They're only the first batch that we're sending you. We may at some point send a second or a third batch. Yeah. If at some point we decide that we're not going to send any more batches, we'll let you know that those were our final ones.
Bob, you're suggesting a good argument, and I don't disagree with the fact that that's a good argument. But also, you know, let's say that you're producing a book and you submit the first 5 chapters of an 11-chapter book. Yes, each one of them is polished to perfection. They're final. Is the book done? Is the entire book presentable? should it be passed on to the publisher for action? You know, there's other analogies that could be made. And so we have to look to the language of our charter. And we have to look to the process that's followed and what is intended when, and we have to pull out all these different things. As you know, as a lawyer, these things are not always, a lot of talk can be had about all of these topics. And I'd like to say that I have a crystal ball and can predict for you what those are. And you know I don't. And so I'm just trying to guide you in a way that is safe, that is predictable, that you have confidence with, that I have confidence with, and that's what I want.
We appreciate your advice.
I want to clarify that if you go back and read Randy's memo that we received on the 28th, prosecutor did not tell us you can't do this. The prosecutor, I think the language was used was, the recommendation is we take a more conservative approach because of the questions that have been raised. So it's very clear that we can do this. The point is there is a risk associated with that.
Understood.
And do we want to take that risk?
This has been a good discussion. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other points on this right now? Okay, Dave, please.
Yeah. Cannot the county council just put things on the ballot? So what if there is a problem that the commission can't put it forward, can't the council put these issues on the ballot for us?
If they chose to. We've heard from 2 council members that they're not very excited about some of our amendments. So that is another risk, which I think is greater than this risk. So it depends on what those amendments are. Some of our amendments are very nuts and bolts and really, and frankly, it's why the executive committee recommended and the full commission approved that many of these things are originally were amendments are now becoming recommendations because they're just really good things to do. They're good government actions that we've identified. And so it is very clear the county council can take the time to get those done over the next year or so. And also the county council through ordinance can put their own things forward to be in the charter, and they can go through that process as well if they need to with some of those recommendations that we've put forward. So the joking aside, Dave, yes, that can happen, of course. Bob?
I think it's important that the commission not misinterpret what the charter says. The council has no role in reviewing or correcting or doing anything to our recommendations. They must pass them on to the auditor. They must end up on the ballot. Now, as Kevin has pointed out, they can run a counter one, boing, boing, if they care to, but they're just there as a conduit. And we ought to, of course, we're going to be solicitous, and we want to maintain a good relationship with the council, and we'll try and let them know what's going on. But we don't need to sit around with bated breath wondering whether they're going to approve something we send them. That's not the process.
Janet.
Actually, to Bob's point, Randy, I have a question. So the letter we received from the county council talking about 3 touches and a hearing, and that's not applicable, is it? We just submit our amendments. They pass it on to the auditor, correct?
If I can address that. Yes, they are not talking about an ordinance that is required with 3 touches. And what is mentioned in that letter is that they are asking for a reasonable amount of time in order to consider what it is that you're setting forth. And what a reasonable amount of time is, I'm not here to say, but it has to do with what their process involves and the fact that they like to touch things more than once. It's part of their ordinance and procedures. And so it would be certainly too short to submit something on the last day when a commissioner is absent. And when before that, I can't say, but you should try to get something to them, to give them a reasonable amount of time to
But
do what they-
I just want to clarify, that would be a courtesy for us to allow them time to have the whatever they want to do, but that's not part of the actual process as described in the charter in terms of the CRC and an amendment.
The timeline between the submittal to the council and the reception of the proposal by the council and the submittal to the auditor is not specified in the charter. Okay, no time is mentioned. And so that's why I'm using the word reasonable amount of time. In the law, what we do is when a time is not specified, the courts interpret that to mean a reasonable amount of time. And so all I'm saying is a reasonable amount of time is not instantaneous for a public agency such as the county council, but I can't say exactly what it is. I'm not here to say that today.
Okay, I've got Anne-Marie, Maureen, and then Dick.
Randy, I just wanted to clarify, when the county council puts through their own charter amendments, they have to do an ordinance, but they don't have to do any kind of ordinance or resolution to move ours through. Our process is we do the resolution and give them the documents and they pass it on. Isn't that correct?
I would say the county council acts by resolutions. And so they pass it on by resolution. But a resolution does not have a.
It says in the charter that they do an ordinance.
For them, they have to do
If I can clarify.
Something forward.
Kevin is describing what is the process for amendments proposed by the county council. They do amendments by ordinance. But when they take action to deliver documents or to make transmittals and so on, they often use a resolution to do that. When they approve contracts, when they do different things, it's often done by resolution. So there is a certain period of time and consideration that is appropriate when you have a 3-member body and it has to act as a group.
Maureen or Anne-Marie, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. It looked like in 2012, the commission drafted the resolution and sent that to the county council. And that's how it flowed through.
If I can speak to that, that is the resolution of the CRC. And that is your resolution, which you should do. All right, you should have a resolution and that should have the form like was done in 2012 with each of you signing, either approving or objecting, so that historically we know who approved and who objected and why. Not why, but as to what measures and what propositions. And then that is what is received by the county council. And then it acts by resolution to deliver to the county auditor. A separate resolution of the county council.
Maureen?
I believe, Randy, you prepared that resolution, or you gave us a template that
Right.
we completed and filled in. I mean, it was pretty simple. But I wanted to go back for a minute because what was touched on by Janet was confusing. The clerk of the council sent an email with all the touch information and the available dates, et cetera. And that, of course, wasn't included in what Jamie sent directly to the full commission. And he omitted the language of touches, and it was not a formal hearing. It's just to be what it is. When we presented in 2012, Gordy Peterson and I brought the resolution into the hearing. We just gave it to them. It wasn't anything more than a simple pass on to them. And that sufficed. It was, but you had checked everything prior to that. So we knew that we were doing it correctly.
So
Okay.
in 2012, Maureen, did the county council, or I've looked into this and I can't find a resolution that the county council did in 2012. It seems like
It wasn't. This
the
was the one that's attached to the emails that we received this last few days is the resolution that was passed through to the council.
Yes, I understand. I understand. That's the resolution of the Charter Review Commission.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is absolutely appropriate. That's how you take action as well. It's a good approach. I recommend it.
But Randy, the clarification is in 2012, the county council did not do a resolution.
I don't know what they did. I haven't researched that.
I think that's the case. I think it was just because it was sent to the county council and to the auditor at the same time. The county council stamped it in and then said, auditor, here it is. There was no resolution as far as I've been able to find, and no action. There was.
I'm sure there was action of some kind. You'd have to check the minutes.
Well, if I've checked and I haven't found it. So if somebody else can find it, that'd be great. Because if that's the case, then we should know that.
Bill, do you remember that?
Kevin, I have an answer to that. Could I read from the county council letter that came in the other day? It
Well, we're
says,
talking about 2012.
well, let me refer to what they're expecting.
David, you're out of order.
David, I'll put you on the list, but let me go because I had Dick next. But Maureen, did you want to respond to something just then?
Just that what the word used in the charter says that the charter review files a document with the council. That's what the requirement is. If the word is file, and that file is a form of a resolution.
That's you're talking about the action of the county council there. Yes, and I agree with that. Very good. I agree. Excuse me, that's the action of the Charter Review Commission.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Wait,
That
wait
is
a
right.
minute.
That's the action of the Charter Review Commission. The Charter Review Commission files the document. The county council receives it. And then the county council has a reasonable amount of time to deliver that or to the county auditor.
Which is written on the document. You can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got Dick, David, Bob.
The reality is the council cannot alter, amend, or do anything with what the Charter Review Commission does. All they do is transmit it to the auditor. So I'm not saying we should do this. We should give them as much time as we can, but we could give them a week in advance of their meeting because all they have to do is transmit it to the auditor. The charter doesn't say anything about a resolution. It doesn't even say anything about a vote. They just pass it off. And we need to stick to what the charter says.
Yes. And Bill, thank you for that.
The council acts with a vote, however. They will take a vote. They must take a vote. There's no choice about that.
Fine, but a week's notice, if that's all we had by the time we finish, is plenty of time to do that. There's this 3 touches business and all of that is only if the council decides they're going to file their own amendment.
Okay, so I've got David and then Bob and then Sharon.
So if I understood correctly, there was a question as whether or not the county council is going to pass an ordinance or a resolution or whatever, what kind of action they take or don't take. I know that they can't change anything. That's not the question. But I'm going to read from the letter that was received just a couple of days ago or yesterday. This is the expectation now of the county council as they state in this letter. And Randy, I assume you saw this and agree with it. It says the county council letter June 8th to us, the Charter Review Commission says amendments proposed to the CRC are to be filed with the county council and then submitted to the county auditor. Here's the key 2 sentences. The county council submits to the auditor by way of resolution. County council appreciates your cooperation in providing a reasonable amount of time to review the proposals and take this required action. Required action being, referring to the previous sentence, says that they're going to do it by way of a resolution. So that's their expectation. Randy, I assume you saw this or they wouldn't have put it out without you seeing it. So that's what they're going to do. And who knows what they're going to talk about when they talk about and vote on a resolution, but they can't change things. My concern is that they get into a discussion. If we have 2 different batches, they get into a discussion and say, okay, we can't change things. Well, I question whether or not there can be 2 different batches. And so let's go to Randy and ask Randy. That's what they're likely to do or could do. And then we'll get in you're an attorney for us and you're an attorney for them. And it has to be consistent.
David.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to caution us. So we've moved on from the double batches piece.
No.
And we're talking about yeah, and right now the discussion is just on what the county council has to do. And I think, yes, we received a letter from the chair of the county council, or from Jamie Stevens saying, from Councilmember Stevens saying, they intend to do a resolution.
Right, that's my point. Thank you.
Conversation tonight that's happening right now is that in all of our research, I don't think that's the precedent. There was not a resolution that I can find in 2012. It looks like it was just passed through. I'm not even sure. I agree with Randy. There must have been a vote, but I haven't even been able to find a vote. And I spent, well, last night until 3 a.m. And the other night doing the same thing. And so I'm just trying to figure out what the process is. Now, if the county council chooses to do a resolution, that's their prerogative. But to Dick's point, and I'm going to put a finer thing on it. I said this earlier. I hope, and I said this in the email to all you too, I hope that we can expedite our work and finish in the near term. And for me, that's like the next couple of weeks. And that would allow everything we're talking about to happen, to what the county council's wishes are and so on. However, we will submit our recommendations for propositions, our amendments to the county council to be forwarded to the auditor, to be put on the ballot when they are finished and not before. We have to get them right. And so if that takes us longer, it's going to take us longer. Unfortunately, this whole discussion has cost us as a full commission, and some of us significantly more, but a whole bunch of time. And so we could have been done weeks ago, frankly. There's been a lot of different discussions about this process that are just taking a lot of time. And so my point I really want to underscore right now is that I think we need to expedite our work, we need to keep our heads down and do our work, and we need to do it right. And so we're going to turn in our amendments when they're done. And I hope that that's soon. Bob and then Sharon.
I took a look at the 2012 material. In 2012, the commission, of course, wrote its own resolution, attached to it its proposed amendments, and they sent the original to the auditor.
Yeah.
They sent the copy to the council. Now, the council, why they have to vote on something and what they're taking a vote on is beyond me. What if they vote no? Who cares if they vote yes or no? They are compelled by the terms of the charter to deliver this thing to the auditor. End of story.
Randy.
If I could just answer you, Bob, briefly. It does great work to look at different charters. If you look at different charters, we're the only charter that has language exactly like this, where it's just transmitted to the county council and then on to the county auditor. Other charters usually have an additional step to be taken by the county council. And so it varies widely across the state about what happens. And so this charter in San Juan County is the bare bones charter, but it's not absent of that step. And so the step is there, you have to follow it. That's what you need to do.
And I don't think anybody's suggesting we're not going to submit to the council. That's not being suggested. The only question is, what action they need to take. So I've got Sharon, Paul, Dick, Maureen.
Yeah, I was basically going to ask what Bob was asking. I don't really understand why it goes to the county council and what they need time to review if all they're doing is just taking it and passing it right along to the county auditor.
Okay. Paul?
Well, as I listen to this, it sounds like to me we're spinning our wheels. We've got so much time to make some decisions here. And I'd like to revert back to the discussion we had about the elections. We didn't really talk about how we're going to rectify the situation. We've got too many amendments for 2 elections, and the fact that we might have 2 could lose interest in the voters. So I'd like to make a motion. I move that the CRC to submit its approved amendments for the 2021 election only. Now we get past that first. I guess I won't go beyond that.
Second.
It takes a motion to reconsider.
Yep. Not, you have a motion. We've already made this decision. So you need somebody who voted on the prevailing side to call for reconsideration of the previous motion. We can't just have competing motions under Robert's rule.
And
So-
doesn't Kevin, doesn't the second also have to be someone on the prevailing side?
Yes. Yes. So, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is because we've already made this decision that take somebody who voted on the prevailing side of the motion on the 27th to ask for reconsideration. And so I will say that motion is out of order.
So
Now, Paul, hang on one second. I want to go back to what I was suggesting earlier, which I think may get to your point, which is what I was suggesting is that the executive committee look at this and come back with a recommendation. And one of the recommendations may be, look, guys, we've got, we can narrow this down or we can't, but we think it should be 1 year. But I think having that process take place first is helpful. And so that would be that next Wednesday, we make a decision on that of whether we're 2 years or 1, because the executive committee will have come back by that point with recommendations. Paul.
Yes.
So have that discussion, I will withdraw that motion. Didn't have a second anyway. And move to have a motion that we move our amendments to the executive committee for determination.
I'll second that.
To lessen our amendments.
Okay, and actually Tony put in the chat some time ago a potential motion for that, which provided the detail for that. But I think, Paul, you got the gist of it. Tony, I see you looking at a computer. I'm sure you're looking up Robert's rules. Am I correct on what I put forward?
No, I mean, you're correct. It has to be done by the prevailing side, but the second doesn't have to be. The second, all it is just moves that motion forward.
Okay,
but
great.
my point is that
if you had something else, I got to put you on the list. I'm sorry.
I don't have my hand up though. I've had my hand up.
I've got you on the list, but I've got you behind. Dick just went, so I've got Maureen and then Liz and then you and then Bob and that's it, I think. So, Maureen.
I can't even remember the question I had because I feel like I'm on a merry-go-round that is moving very quickly. So I will happily let the next person go.
Liz?
So I'm totally in favor of us moving this off to the executive committee. And I'm just baffled by the lack of clarity on the process. And that doesn't feel any clearer, if not muddier to me than when we started. And so to Randy, I don't understand if it's not in our home rule charter, even though it's out there in other charters, then that would be the work of another commission to say we need to add that process to ours, but currently it's not there. So I'm just totally confused as to why we need to abide by regulations that aren't in our charter. And the third thing is what are they voting on? You seem to be very clear that they're voting, and I don't understand what is it they're voting on. Thank you. If you could give me an answer, I'd appreciate that, Randy.
Well, the motion was to submit it to the executive committee. They're not voting on anything.
No, I think what Liz was asking was clarification on the previous subject or the previous conversation. Maureen, I'll get back to you in 1 second. It sounds like maybe you remembered your question.
I don't know if Randy stepped away, but it's not clear to me. It's been repeated that they're voting. Everybody seems to be real clear that the council is voting. What are they voting on?
Aren't we discussing the motion?
We're discussing the motion.
There's a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Yes.
Speak to the motion.
Well, this is my discussion. It's hard to vote on the motion, not understanding what the regulations are around how we move forward.
Dick, hang on. I will try and summarize before we call the question. So let me go back to Maureen.
No, please don't go back to me. I beg you.
Okay, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we are totally confused because it seems to me that the motion that was done last time I'm talking about this current motion right now, because the motion that was done last time did not really say anything other than to allow the executive committee to look at the possibilities of doing 1, 2, 3 different ballots, whatever that was. The current discussion that we're having right now is that it is to me clear that we have not done part of our job as commission reviewers or charter reviewers, which is if there's a problem in the system the way it is now, dealing with what happens in elections and what happens in moving stuff forward, why didn't we look at it so that we can actually recommend clarity and recommend cleaning it up? So here we are looking at in the 11th hour, trying to figure out what's going to happen. And yet we could have spent some time trying to clean this up early on.
I got an amendment section right here.
Well, hold on a second. My frustration with all this is that we visited this last meeting, and here we are trying to visit this again. So it's really not clear at all what we're going to vote for, if it's not clear at the end of the day what's going to happen. Thank you.
That was my point. Thank you, Tony.
Bob? Bob, you're muted.
I just wanted to say that Tony, was it Tony that made the motion?
No, I
No,
did.
don't blame me for that.
Oh, okay. Okay, Paul did. That he used the word for determination, and we won't be determining anything. We'll be coming up with a recommendation for the full council. The full council has to determine how we're going to move forward. It's the full commission. I'm sorry, the full commission. And if I won't bring up the other thing. I shared with you, Kevin, about my little proposed 1-sentence amendment to clear all this up next time.
Talk about that later.
I call the question to refer this to the executive committee and the executive committee to bring it back to a full CRC meeting next week.
There's still hands up. So I know
You can't
that.
just call the election.
Yeah, so let's and we actually, yes, Olivia, thank you. This is nice. I'm just going to pause this right now because we're going to go to public comment. Before we go to public comment, I just want to say, no, actually, I'll hold my comment as well. So we're going to go to public comment. So anybody of the public, and Kelly, I see your camera on. Your camera's been on. What we ask is for members of the public to keep your camera off because of the way Zoom prioritizes. But if you would like to speak or any other member of the public would like to speak at this point in time, please turn your camera on if you're able and unmute yourself and let us know that you'd like to comment. Kelly turned off her camera. Okay. Like, I don't want to talk. Is anybody from the public like to comment at this point in time? Okay. I'm not seeing anybody. So with that, I will close public comment and I will go back. So I see Dave and then David, and I wanted to respond quickly to Tony. Tony, the reason we are having this entire conversation right now, and it was not brought up months ago, is because it just landed in our lap in the last 14 days. Never before has there been any discussion other than the precedent, which was there, which was we submit to the council and they move it on to the auditor. We understood we could go 2 batches. We understood that we had a timeline. And so what we were thinking was we would put forward the prioritized batches in the first timeline. They would have been submitted yesterday, the 8th, to the county council. And I believe we could have had those ready because we spent the previous 10 days working on going back and forth on this matter instead of finalizing those amendments. And so the changes in the and the updated information that the prosecutor provided us with threw a wrench into our work because we had to consider that and it was different. And the second thing was the county council has had conversations on at least 2 occasions where they have questioned the timing of when they're going to get things. And that is brand new to us as well. So it's not that we didn't, that we knew about this or something and didn't act on it. It's that it just landed on our lap. I will say, I have heard from several people that this is something that should be clarified. And I've heard totally mixed sides of it, that if we kept working for a second year or through the end of this year, not a second year, we wouldn't be working, that one thing may be that we just submit directly to the auditor. Like, why is it even going to the council? Because they can't do anything with it anyway. And individual commissioners have brought that to. The other thing is, should we be more like another charter county and change it so the council actually has more say so? Right now, I would say none of those are issues that we are discussing today, because frankly, we don't have time to bring up entirely new issues unless the commission feels like maybe we should. But I just wanted to respond, Tony, that in my opinion, that's why it's on our lap now.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yeah, please.
take a slightly opposing view. There are two issues here. One issue is what happens with the council or not. And the other issue is, do we have one or two different sets of ballots?
That's right.
The one or two different sets of ballots is what you are alluding to, that we've just found out about this recently. The part about sending it to the council and what happens then, or can it go directly to Mylene's office, to the auditor's office? That is something that's in the charter. It tells us there what should happen. It should go to the council and the council does something with it. Now, if we didn't like that, we should have acted on it earlier.
Okay.
What the question with Randy's issue is, I get it. There's a little difference of opinion, and I think Randy did clarify his position on it, which I agree with it. He didn't have the full information then, and now he does. So that's a different story. My point was, we're trying to figure out what happens when the council gets it. And here we are in the 11th hour trying to figure out if the council needs to have it now or in August.
There's a vote.
Is this an out of order conversation? This has
Yes, it
nothing to
is.
do with, it's out of order. This is, you guys going back and forth, wasting time, Kevin. You lectured me, I'll lecture you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Dave is
Dave-
up next.
So let's move forward then. We have a motion and a second on the table. The motion on the second on the table is to ask the executive committee to take this under consideration with regard to the amendments. So it's looking at the amendments, and if they have time, the recommendations, but really looking at the amendments and saying, okay, which of these could we combine? Which of these could we jettison? Which of these could become recommendations? And then look at them again. The exercise we went through last time was also, if we were going to do two batches, which ones of these would be first year, second year, of the ones that are still there? But there's obviously, several of us have expressed our question of whether or not we still want to do one or two batches. And so this exercise, I believe, will inform that decision, which is
Yep.
why we keep having a circular conversation and going back to the batches, because one will inform the other.
Yep. That's right.
Okay. So Tony has put in the chat suggested language for the actual motion, which is, and I'm just reading it. Folks should.
I
you-
thought somebody called the question.
Chair, I have
Question.
That's not what I'm putting.
That's what I just described is, I believe the motion, and I believe the maker of the motion and the second of the motion agreed that that is what we have said. So that's the question on the table. Can we call the question?
You
No,
were going to call
Dave.
Dave, you're going to call on Dave
Yeah.
and David.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Dave, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The charter was passed as one vote, a lot of ideas put into one vote, and it was an up or down, basically. We were a publicly elected commission brought together to bang our heads together to come up with some ideas that we think should go into the charter. I think it's reasonable to put forward the idea. I'd like the executive committee to at least assess this idea, that we create a slate and have one subject be on the ballot, say the slate of recommendations to change the charter by the San Juan Charter Review Commission, and just have the slate of our changes recommended to the charter voted up or down. I think that would put it all on one ballot. And I think certainly it's political risk within our own commission and a political risk for voters. But I think we have enough interesting things that voters would like, and they can study what they want. And I just think that's a compelling idea that could solve a lot of problems here. Thank you.
I move the
Point of
motion.
order, Mr. Chairman, point of order. I called for the question before you broke for public comment. We just paused for public comment. So I have still called for the question. That doesn't change.
And he said at the time that Dave and David had their hands up.
And David, you've spoken twice already since that point in time. So I'm not sure which one counts as your time.
The call, I think, is more predominant.
Yes.
I agree.
No.
So
The question is called.
Yeah.
you guys, you can't just under Robert. Go ahead, Tony. You can.
Mr. Chair, I have to insist,
Yeah,
just somebody calls for the motion to end debate is not good enough. It has to be approved by the majority, by 2/3 majority of the present members of the commission. Just because you don't like the debate and you want it to end, you can't just call for the motion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
However, debate ends to take a vote on the calling for the question.
Correct.
So that
That is a
happens
correct statement.
immediately.
That has to happen first.
Immediately.
You guys.
All the questions.
So let's just be strict on this. The question's been called. Who votes in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Hang on. Keep your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that might be 2/3. Somebody help me out here. I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Question's called. All those in favor of the motion to ask the executive committee to basically take a look at this as I described earlier and come back with recommendations on reducing the number of amendments with the possibility of some of them becoming recommendations, some of them being jettisoned, and then also considering that if there were still going to be 2 batches, which one would be a batch 1 and a batch 2. That is what I understand the task for the executive committee is. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
And
Tony's abstaining. Okay. There was a question put in the chat. Who is on the executive committee? If you could please raise your hand, just so members of the public know. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, having said that, I want a big compliment to the executive committee. They have done an outstanding job. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. Okay. So I don't have everything I was going to bring up in new business has been brought up. I apologize. Some of this was circular. The reason, as I will say again, the reason I believe it's a circular conversation is because it's totally interrelated. We can't, it's difficult to have a conversation about reducing amendments without knowing if we're doing batch 1, batch 2. Yet they inform one another, which is why I came into this meeting thinking that the executive committee coming back with recommendations is probably a good idea, because it will give us more information to make that ultimate decision next week of whether or not we are continuing with 2 batches or we want to go to 1 batch, 1 ballot measure. The other thing, though, is the entire first half of this meeting was spent talking about the importance of expediting getting the right information to Megan, and most of you already have. And then she's cranking that out. She's going to send it back to you. Please, as soon as you get it from her, review it. If it fits, then you send it to me. And I would love it if you put in the subject, recommendations from this subcommittee on X. And then I will know I send that to Randy. And I will copy the committee leads on those correspondence as well. And then Randy will get back to the entire commission with any suggested changes or recommendations. And he has in the past had both. He has had legal findings where he has said, this is most likely unlawful or doesn't fit legally. And then the other thing is he may say, have a suggestion where he says, this might flow better if you did it one way. And we should consider both of those, the first being a priority. With that, does anybody have anything else? If not, I would accept a motion to adjourn. Maureen.
Just one thing, and I don't wish this to be a domino, just one last thing, so that Liz can sleep well tonight. When we presented our proposals to the county council, they did not vote. It was a handoff. That's all I want to say.
Yep. Janet.
Executive committee time meeting?
Wait, so I was next in the lineup here.
Sorry.
And then Janet.
I didn't want to kick a big conversation up here.
My question still remains, if there's a simple answer and somebody could answer it. Randy has said several times, people have agreed, council is going to vote. What are they voting on? If it's not a simple answer, I'll retract it. But if it's a simple answer, Bob's got his hand up.
Bob, go ahead, and then maybe I'll respond if, yeah.
They're obviously going to pass a resolution that takes a vote.
Well, and
That's
again,
not the
the back
question.
and forth, Liz, was the chair of the county council has told us in a letter, they plan on passing a resolution. That is not required, is our
No.
understanding. And it is not what happened in 2012. In 2012, they literally got it, said thank you, and it went to the auditor. And
I
so
was there.
it is there. Yeah, Maureen actually was in the office. And so that is their prerogative that they want to do a resolution. However, and this is the back and forth, it is still important for us to try and get it to them in a timely manner so that they can look at it, consider it, you know, before they pass it on. But all they're doing is passing it on. So I've got Janet and then Janet.
I'm a little confused on our schedule now. Are we meeting tomorrow morning?
No, we are not. There's not a meeting tomorrow morning, although I would suggest that the executive committee meet at that time.
So that's Bob's answer. And I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Anne Marie and Bill, was that a second?
Certainly was.
Randy's down there with a comment.
Randy, you wanted to say something? You've got a bunch of people wanting to run away.
I do. I just want to say, when a group meets and it makes a decision, it takes a vote of the group to make that decision. That's why the council makes a resolution. They all sign it. It reflects their decision and they put it in writing.
The
That,
council can't,
so that's, I'm not saying it's a discretionary thing. I'm just saying it's how they act. It's how you act and it's how the council acts.
Yep.
Just like the motions we've taken today, however, the county council can take action without a resolution. They can vote on something and it can be an action without a resolution, which is what happened in 2012, it looks like.
Okay.
Well,
So
That is the prerogative of the master of the ship. You know, we're very familiar with ships in this area, and the master of the ship gets to choose how they, what course they take.
which is exactly what I stated a moment ago, which is the chair of the county council has said in a letter to us that it is their intention this time to do a resolution. I was clearly stating the fact that that is their prerogative to answer Liz's question because of the circular conversation we've had for the last hour at this point. There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so I will send out a link to the exec.com. We will meet tomorrow at the time that was going to be the full CRC meeting, which was,
Okay.
what is that, 10 a.m.?
10 a.m.
10
Okay,
a.m.
10 to noon exec.com tomorrow.
we'll be thinking of you.
I'll send you all a link.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, Olivia,